Hi, welcome to Meet RX Success Stories, and I'm Brooke, and today I'm here with Julian. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Brooke. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, and you? How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. As I said to you earlier, early Friday morning here, so yeah, doing all right.
Yeah, Julian's with us from Australia, um, and really glad and appreciate that you take the time to share with our listeners about your carnivore journey and what that's been like for you. So, thank you again. And what has it been like for you?
Sure. Complicated, and but that's something I'm happy to talk about. Is that it's not a straightforward kind of success story, and it's not the case where I look. Long story short, I have moments where I still fall off the wagon and I'm still making mistakes and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
How long has it been? What brought you to this diet?
Um, Started, it's probably about 3 years back or so, hearing Dr. ShawnBaker on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and I think that was the case for a lot of people. Um, it didn't seem so crazy for me at the time because I've always been open to kind of different ideas, that kind of thing. Um, so uh, it took me a while. I tried it for a couple of days. At that stage, I'd already been eating a ketogenic diet for a couple of years, so I was used to low carb eating. So it wasn't too much of a big step to get from one place to the other.
What was that ketogenic diet that you were eating? What was that like? What were you eating?
Um, I was, yeah, well, mainly cutting out, processed or boxed foods. Yeah, mainly just um, yeah, meat, veggies, the standard thing. Lots of high protein, lots of saturated fats. I did struggle with it a little bit with the high sodium kind of content, and that's because I deal with some long-term issues with cortisol and adrenaline. And what comes with that is problems with water retention, which is actually related to sodium, high sodium. And I didn't know that at the time. Um, yeah, sorry, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Well, what were you eating typically before carnivore when you were on keto diet?
Yeah. So, I was doing, again, I got into the keto diet because of Joe Rogan, again, hearing about it on his podcast. And, breakfast for me was the popular kind of butter coffee with MCT oil. And that would kind of keep me going for quite some time. Um, and uh, lunch foods would be, either chicken or beef with heavy sour cream or cheeses, that kind of thing. Um, and even then, I was kind of light on the vegetables as well. And yeah, I don't know why that is. I think just intuitively for myself, I seem to have always had a problem with fiber, or so, you know, um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're eating a meat-based keto. From,
Yeah, and again, I think that's just from intuition, where
Mhm.
um, I've always just had a craving or tendency towards fatty meats, and that's why I said that the transition eventually to carnivore was really easy for me.
Yeah, and, um, and you went to I'm just curious. You started eating keto. Was there was there particular reasons, weight or?
Yeah, well, it was primarily weight. Look, I've always been
I've
mostly overweight,
overweight.
and
And
yeah, cutting out
yeah,
carbs just kind of
cutting out
helped
carbs
me
just kind of helped me.
shed a fair bit of body fat. Um, and yeah, and also the kind of mental health side of it. So I found that by cutting out processed foods, sugars, carbohydrates, I had a lot of mental clarity as well.
Yeah. So then you heard Sean and thought you would sort of drop some of the other extraneous things and just go with meat for a while.
That's right. Yeah. So did try that for a
What was that
while.
like? Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it didn't feel too crazy. Just jumping across to just meat. Um, Again, I had problems initially with electrolyte balance, and that's due to my adrenaline and cortisol issues. So yeah, that was 3 years ago. So it's been a bit of a journey of trialing it a little bit and then going, oh, something's a bit off here. I'm not too sure what. And then going, oh, I better be safe and just go back to my regular keto diet or whatever. And until I could figure things out a bit better, do a bit of research, and then try and jump back in, so to speak. And so it wasn't
So
until
I'm
about,
curious.
no,
Go
you're right.
ahead. No, go ahead. You go. You go.
Yeah,
What
it
were you
wasn't
saying?
until about 6 months to a year ago where I did my research and I knew the insides and outs of it and kind of, yeah, fully committed to it.
Okay, I'm curious. So when you said you went back to keto, what would that mean? What does that mean to you when you said you tried a carnivore and then you went back to keto? What did
Yeah.
you include? What did you add in?
Uh, it's been quite a while. It's hard to think back, but I think mainly just getting incidental carbohydrates from some starchy vegetables or things like that. So I found, again, with the adrenaline and cortisol issues, having at least a little bit of carbohydrates kind of lowered those cortisol levels for me. But it's kind of funny now as we're talking, for the last 6 months or so, I've had pretty much zero carbs, and my adrenaline levels are fine, and that might be due to some like supplementation and things I'm taking in that regard.
Are you still starting your day off with coffee?
No, no. So when I saw a specialist about a year ago for some leaky gut issues and that kind of thing, it's that thing where I intuitively should have known better. I knew intuitively before I got tested that I had cortisol issues, and I knew that I would feel like crap when I had coffee. But it's such an addictive, and it's such an addictive thing. It was very hard to give up.
Yeah, some people don't. Some people, don't give it up and it works for them. Like you
Yeah,
said, it's all about that tweaking, but it sounds like you've been fine tuning your own diet.
yeah, that's right. And everybody's different, and yeah, in my case, it really has been fine tuning and finding a mix of different supplements and different cuts of meat and ways of doing it and preparing it that have. And as I said, it's only been in the last couple of months that I've finally figured out a formula that's kind of working for me.
So what is that formula? What are you eating now?
Um, so at the moment, so I mentioned, look, mostly no coffee, but as I said to you earlier, look, I'm human, and yeah, I still make mistakes. If I'm sick or burned out with work, I will still kind of fall back and have a coffee, or even make the mistake and go get some junk food and then end up feeling terrible afterwards. But so at the moment, it's basically 1 kilogram. I'm not sure of the system conversion for pounds, but I have about 1 kilogram of chuck steak throughout the day, and yeah, just grazing on that, and that seems to satisfy me. One thing that I do,
I
sorry,
think that's about 2 pounds, I think,
yeah,
a kilo. Yeah. So 2 pounds of chuck steak.
yeah, and that was based on. I also read a book by Dr. Paul Saladino, who's been another good resource for me, and he mentioned about a kind of protein and fat calculator based on your age, height, weight, and what have you. And so I find that the 1 kilogram for me is perfectly kind of satiating, and I kind of just graze on that throughout the day.
Nice. So you have like maybe late morning or early afternoon, or what time about do you eat that first?
Yeah, well, I make sure that so I'll pre-cook my meat kind of either the night before or the first thing in the morning, and just carry it in a Tupperware kind of container because to my landscaping job, and just kind of graze little bits here and there. But I always make sure to have a couple of pieces first thing in the morning, and again, that's related to the cortisol issues. So, you know, I know that these days intermittent fasting is very popular, but for me, not having food for a long period of time will increase those kind of adrenaline levels. And eating food, whether it's has carbohydrates or not, any kind of food just kind of helps dampen that down.
Yeah. So you found that you do eat some, you start your day, you're hungry, you have some food, sounds like you have meat. And then throughout the day, you'll have more of that same meat. So it
Yeah.
sounds like it's a pretty simple rudiment meat diet then. You just mentioned beef. Are you eating eggs or?
No, I did try eggs for a while, but in line with my leaky gut diagnosis, I've actually found I have a strong intolerance for things that have glutamine or glutamate, and eggs actually tend to be one of them for me.
So you avoid eggs right now. That works better for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's well,
And
that's basically why I got onto the diet. I should mention, yeah, is as a kind of an ultimate elimination diet for all these kind of toxins and additives and issues I was having with all these other foods.
yeah. Do you eat dairy food?
I did for a while. You know, still included cheese, some heavy cream, and that's because I was going based on the idea that carnivore is essentially, you know, any foods that come from an animal, so to speak. But
Yeah,
I've
I think
actually,
yeah.
I was going to say, I've just come around on that now, where I'm now in that group where no, yeah, cutting out dairy makes me feel better. Yeah.
And so it sounds like you're kind of eliminating your sort of elimination diet right now with just the ruminant meat and salt. I guess you use salt, or do you use salt?
So no, on the salt thing, I may have mentioned, yeah, that because of my adrenaline and cortisol issues, anything with the tiniest bit of salt, my body tends to retain that as like a
Okay.
water kind of thing, and makes me very puffy, very noticeable, you know, if I have things with high salt. But what I've discovered recently is taking that chuck steak that I use and just soaking it in water overnight. And that tends to leach out the sodium, but apparently still retains all the other kind of minerals and things like that.
Wow, I haven't heard of that. So you take your ground chuck and you soak it overnight in clean water, and the next morning you drain it off and cook it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Huh.
and it's still, you know, it's still tasty. It's fine, but I can tell straight away, you know, if I were. So what I find is in our supermarkets, different cuts of meat, they don't seem to advertise it, but I believe that they'll kind of add in extra things afterwards, like maybe a bit of salt to make it more tasty or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the case in my
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Have you found that with other meats, like with steak, or have you
Um,
found a reaction? Is it like a histamine reaction for you?
well, that's another thing I've had trouble with. Yeah, is histamine. Um, no, for me, yeah, well, I just tend to find different cuts of meat or what have you if they're higher in sodium naturally. Not just the water retention, but I'll feel it in terms of blood pressure, and like my heart rate will increase a lot, and
Wow.
yeah, very
Okay.
uncomfortable. Yeah,
And what about organ meat, like liver, for instance? Are you eating that?
that's yeah, that's something I'm trying now to implement. So due to the leaky gut issue means that my body can't really hold on and absorb nutrients very well, and so I've always supplemented with, you know, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, that kind of thing. But what I'm trying to now work towards is getting all of those elements just from, you know, the animal-based diet. So recently I've managed to find, I think it was chicken livers and lamb's heart and those kind of things. So, and, you know, doing it that way is much cheaper than having separate bottles of supplements from the health store.
Yeah, I know, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you are incorporating bits of different organ meat? You just cook them up, fry them up?
Yeah, and that's only been recently in the last couple of weeks. The most recent one I've been able to find it. Funnily enough, it's quite hard to find organ meats, and I think that's from, I've heard Dr. Paul Saladino mention that, you know, these days it's considered scrap, you know, and no one understands the nutrient value of it, so they just throw it out. But when I have managed to find, you know, as I mentioned, I found lamb's hearts in the store the other day, and it was just $5 for a big pack of them. And
Wow.
yeah, pan fry, slice it up, pan fry it, and put it in a little container, and that'll be kind of the snack that I'll have on the side in between my main food.
Yeah, great. So is that the grocery store that just had these big bag of lamb hearts? The
Yeah,
regular.
yeah, which was surprising. So there's our main supermarket chain, there's Woolworths. But what I want to start doing is actually going to more the local butchers and supporting them, and speaking to them about sourcing those things.
Well, it sounds like you're really careful with your diet and you're trying to make it work just right for you. I'm curious what when you don't get it right, I'm curious what those symptoms are for you that alert you that it's not correct for you.
Yeah, sure. Um, so there's two big ones I've found, which is glutamate, and the other one tends to be this particular preservative. It's called preservative E202, potassium sorbate, and it tends to be in quite a lot of processed grocery store foods as a preservative. Um, Both of those things have similar symptoms for me. So if I consume foods that have that in it, probably within about an hour or so, I will have my gut will tighten up in terms of, I feel like I'm having a panic attack. I get a really bad brain fog. I can't think clearly. And the biggest effect is actually emotionally or behaviorally. Um, uh, yeah, I've actually had what I call rage attacks. I'll become abnormally angry, fist clenchingly kind of angry over nothing. And it took a while to attribute that to what I was eating, to look back and go, okay, what have I put in my body that's different from usual? And playing detective and going, okay, it must be that.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? How food affects us so much.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And that there are people who actually don't think food affects them at all,
Yeah.
strangely enough. Yeah. Well, good for you to be able to sort that out. Um, I'm interested in this idea of you discovering these cortisol levels and how they affect you, and then adjusting your time of eating, and that helps you with that.
Okay. Yeah. I've
That's
intuitively always felt that I've had these cortisol issues, and you
yeah.
know, I just thought that feeling anxious all the time was normal and that everyone felt that way, until a few years back, when I looked into it, and I thought I'd finally get some blood work done, and it proved exactly what I thought. You know, it had this chart of, you know, people's normal cortisol levels is here kind of thing, and mine was always above average. Um, and so, sorry, you were mentioning, you're curious how that.
Well, I think that's great that you're able to sort of discover that and then change your time of eating, and it seems to alleviate some of that for you.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. Like
as
eat
you
it in the
probably,
morning after a long night of fasting, which is what we're doing when we're sleeping.
yeah,
Um, then you found that if you would eat in the morning, that it would level that off.
that's right.
Yeah.
And as you probably know, as a lot of people probably know, we naturally get a kind of cortisol spike in the morning, which is evolutionary designed to kind of get us up and go hunting
Yeah.
for food, that kind of thing. So the problem is for someone like myself, is that's spiking, you know, double the amount. And then, you know, when you add coffee and other stimulants and things onto it, it's, you know, why am I suddenly having an anxiety attack? I don't understand it. But the funny thing is, as you know, carbohydrates tend to suppress cortisol. And they do say that apparently the low carb or zero carb way of eating apparently has a cortisol increase. I'm not too sure how true that is, but yet I find that I've now found a balance of zero carb plus I have these adaptogenic supplements that help regulate those cortisol levels. So those two hand in hand seem to work for me.
Okay, so I'm curious, what are the adaptogenic
Yeah.
supplements?
So there's one, it might be an Australian company, but it's from a company called Bioceuticals. It's called Adrenoplex. And it's the main ingredient is it's called ashwagandha, which is like a Vedic supplement, along with I think it's B6, B12, and tyrosine and ginseng. And I happened to discover it by accident, and I remember the day that I took it, and I just felt my my physical being kind of just relaxed, and my racing thoughts and everything just stopped, and I thought, okay, this is normal. So what I've been feeling for the last 25 years or what have you, okay, yeah, I didn't understand it, and that really helps just level things out for me mentally.
Nice. I'm glad you discovered that. Sounds good. Is that something you have as a beverage, or is it a capsule?
It's capsules, and I take them first thing in the morning. As I mentioned before, the kind of morning cortisol spike. So it really helps to just dampen that down and curb that.
How's your sleep?
Yeah, I've always struggled with sleep, very light and restless. I attribute that again to cortisol issues. I'm learning as the years go on, it might be electrolyte related. So again, I mentioned my kind of intolerance for sodium or high salty foods. And if I tend to have, if we go out for dinner and I have like a really salty dinner, I tend to have a very restless sleep. So again, I've noticed, if I just have something that's lower in salt and maybe a bit higher in potassium and, drink a fair bit of water, my sleep quality will be much better.
Have you ever tried those adaptogenic supplements in the evening for your sleep?
I have, yeah. I did find that one I mentioned before, Adrenoplex, that the B vitamins taken at nighttime for me would actually cause really vivid dreams or nightmares and actually make things worse for me. So,
Oh, well, that's not good.
no.
Well, vivid dreams might be good, but nightmares, no.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't want that. Okay. Because I think it was a mushroom and it was amino acid in that and some B vitamins.
That's right, yeah. So it's ashwagandha, some B vitamins, tyrosine, and I think ginseng as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good. So it works in the morning, not so much in the evening.
That's right, yeah.
Do you eat in the evening? Does
Yeah,
it help to eat late?
well, another thing I found that Dr. Saladino mentioned in one of his books is I found this for myself, that I now have a more natural tendency to want to just graze a little bit here and there throughout the day. And I maybe have a natural hunger around 10 a.m. and probably 4 p.m. or so. I tend to find that I'm finishing up my last bit of food around 4, 5, 6 p.m. at the latest. Whereas traditionally in the past, so my wife is Italian, and they're used to doing things kind of later in the evening. So a very late dinner around 9 p.m., that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that never really worked for me. But yeah.
You had to wait for dinner and then you had to eat late.
Yeah, and then go to bed early because I do a
That's
landscaping job, so I'm up early in the morning, and yeah.
Yeah. Very good. I really love the way you have allowed yourself to tweak the diet and make these changes and adjustments and listen and see how that's working. It's great.
Yeah,
I think,
thank you. Yeah.
yeah, it's really good for you. It's really good to hear someone being able to work around with it and make it their own and tweak things. And it sounds like still such an elimination diet. And then, which is great. And then you did share that sometimes you go off on the rails and not to belabor it, but I'm just curious what it is that you're attracted to when that happens. Is it just anything, or is it, particular things?
Yeah, well, I was just having this discussion with my wife last night, and I said that when I did this interview, I would be honest that I'm not 100% clean and perfect, and I don't want to hide that. Like
You're perfect.
yesterday,
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you're perfect.
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Perfectly imperfect. Yeah.
So, like this week, I've been struggling with a bit of a cold and a viral problem, and so long story short, I think that my attraction back to carbs or junk food or what have you is again cortisol related. Even despite those adaptogenic supplements, I found that sure that what I'm doing now keeps things in balance, but if I get really sick, I found that I have quite a big cortisol spike. I know what that feels like now after all these years. And look, as much as I hate to admit it, for me personally, I find that reaching back for carbohydrates or quick sugars or, junk food or candy or sweets tends to just, again, dampen down and makes my body relax a little bit. And
Uh-huh.
I know it's not a healthy solution, and that's what I'm trying to move away from. But so yeah, now I'm just kind of looking into ways of when I'm having a spike in higher stress, whether that's due to having a cold or work stress or what have you, is what is a healthier solution for that?
Yeah. So what have you decided?
Yeah.
What's a healthier
um,
solution?
well, we've actually found some tablets that have that ashwagandha herb that I mentioned without the kind of energizing B vitamins. So that means that I'll be able to take that at any time of the day, any time of the night, and it's not going to affect my sleep. So, and it does the same job in terms of, the sugars or the candy or this herb. They both do that job of lowering the cortisol, and one is
Yeah.
obviously healthier than the other.
Well, when you've chosen the other, I'm not sure what the other is. Is the other just some fruit or some honey or a cupcake or a candy bar
Yeah, no, so
or
we're talking about
pint of ice cream? What is it?
so it's we in Australia we call them lollies or sweets or candy. So
With
yeah,
sugars.
yeah,
Yeah.
jelly beans, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you referenced Paul so many times, several times,
Yeah.
and from his book, and I know that he utilizes honey and fruit. So, have you found that to be helpful for you?
Yeah, so I did try what he's talked about a lot lately, which is organic raw honey, which apparently doesn't spike your insulin or is supposed to, yeah. And you would think that would help with in terms of cortisol and
Yeah.
carbohydrates for myself.
Did it?
Um, but what I found is I may not have mentioned, so with all this leaky gut stuff, I've just recently got over battling a candida overgrowth in my gut. And I didn't realize until in hindsight that honey tends to be naturally kind of fermented if you leave it too long, or develop some kind of natural yeast in it,
Yeah.
which would then kind of exacerbate this candida issue. So when I did try and introduce honey, yeah, it did feel good mood-wise in terms of tamping things down again. But I did notice a few little physical ailments that I then attributed to that candida, the fungal overgrowth.
Uh-huh. Okay, so honey didn't quite work then for you.
No, no, it wasn't worth it. So that's been the battle for me is, trying to balance toxins and additives and the leaky gut thing, trying to balance cortisol, and also trying to stay away from foods that were affecting my yeast or candida overgrowth.
Yeah, there's like a real balance there. Did you try fruit?
No, I I haven't really touched a piece of fruit for quite some years. Like I had an apple a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, overall, I just not felt the need for it, or
Mhm.
but yeah, look, maybe that could be another tool I could utilize and see if that does help. I don't know.
Well, I think I have faith that you're gonna continue to find out the best way to sort of to maneuver maneuver your way through this. Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds like um, you have all the tools.
yeah, yeah, yeah. As I
How's
said,
your how's
sorry.
your recovery, physical recovery from strenuous exercise or something?
Oh, okay, right. Well, again, because of those cortisol and adrenaline issues, I've always found that my heart rate will spike up very quickly in terms of high intensity or aerobic things. So and I've all the cortisol issues in the past have always made me feel very fatigued and flat and low energy. Um, but again, yeah, now from eating primarily meat and having those supplements, that kind of thing, the the mood and energy are the two biggest positive things I've found. Where so I might have mentioned I was very overweight kid. I was bullied a lot. I felt terrible. I couldn't understand, and I really think it was because of we call it the standard Australian diet that we're eating with lots of junk food, and I just thought that was normal. Anyway, now that I've found from cutting out all of that crap, that I'm out there bushwalking, bike riding, lifting weights, going to the
Good for
beach
you.
and
Yeah,
doing things like I if 12-year-old me could see 36-year-old me, I wouldn't have believed it. So
you'd
yeah,
be like this.
yeah,
That's great. There are so many estrogenic properties in our modern world. In water, in air, contaminations and contaminants, and certainly in plants, but even in contaminants. So I think the healing properties of meat and animal foods can help with that
yeah,
so
absolutely.
much. Yeah, and I know that those estrogenic compounds are also kind of um, a stress hormone too, like cortisol.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I wasn't aware of that. Okay. That
yeah.
makes sense.
So it sounds like your clean elimination diet is sort of like finding its way and strengthening you to continue to keep tweaking it. That sounds great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And
Um,
it sounds like you stopped drinking coffee.
yeah, yeah. Coffee, alcohol, yeah, and just felt better because of it.
Yeah, good for you. Well, so what's the trajectory to trajectory for you to the
Yeah,
future?
well, yeah. Well, I was just discussing this with my wife the other day as well. That so what I've obviously worked out a good formula in terms of an elimination diet for things that set me off, so to speak. So I've managed to successfully curb my cortisol and deal with eliminating those substances that affect me. But I think the fact is I still have a leaky gut. That still exists for me, and I've got it. I feel the next step is doing some research as to how to actively repair my gut lining while eliminating or restricting, all the stuff that's only making it worse.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm not sure what the right path is for that. And yeah,
Do you use bone broth? Do you make bone broth?
I have tried it in the past. I found obviously great for electrolytes if I'm very dehydrated. But again, I found an issue with high in glutamine or glutamate and histamines. So I
Yeah.
found that, yeah, that was an issue for me
Yeah.
mentally.
Does that mean you, even with gelatin, with grass-fed, grass finished clean gelatin, uh, do you have a histamine response if you use that too?
No, I don't think I've actually tried just gelatin itself. But I see what you're kind of heading towards, which is, yeah, primarily I would like to be able to use this animal-based diet or carnivore diet to heal the leaky gut, because I think that traditional ways, when I Google about, how to fix your leaky gut, it's talking about all these starchy carbohydrates and using all these kind of things that tend to actually make me feel worse. I've tried that for a couple of weeks and
Mhm.
yeah, didn't
Yeah.
seem to work.
Well, it seems like if gelatin could, if you didn't have a histamine response, I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
although you say that glutamines and glutamates, you have a reaction to that.
Yeah.
Have you used glycine, just plain glycine?
No, I know of it.
Amino
I've not
acid?
tried it. So all these things are different amino acids, are they, that you're mentioning?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, you could maybe look into that,
Yeah.
see how that is for your gut.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny that one of the biggest things they say for healing leaky gut is glutamine, which ironically is one of the things that kind of sets me off. So it's very
I
difficult to
know.
figure out. Yeah.
That's really a conundrum. And I think also, I mean, some people find help with kidney, you know,
Okay.
they might have a reaction or a histamine response to organ meat, yet kidney has that DAO in it, which is
Yeah.
which is sort of an antihistamine, so that they find a way to sort of find their way back into health by utilizing it. So
Okay. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
ways to keep trying, I guess you could. Sounds like you're on the path. Sounds
Yeah,
like you're on the,
really turning that corner. Yeah, I've actually
yeah.
just found a few health stores here just in the last few days that are now stocking like grass-fed or finished beef liver and tablets and things like that you mentioned. And also, sorry, kidney as well for the DAO and what have you. So I think that will be my next direction to head in.
Good for you. Um, yeah, keep us posted. I'd be curious to see how you discover how that works for you. Well, do you have any piece of advice for people who are considering the carnivore diet?
Um, yeah, well, as I said, it wasn't too crazy for me coming from eating a ketogenic diet for so long, but
Yeah,
just this it's hard to kind of unlearn all the stuff we're taught as kids, that fat doesn't make you fat, and fat is not the enemy, and eating nothing but meat doesn't make you a crazy person, and it's done quite the opposite. It's just liberated me.
yeah, you don't sound like a crazy person to me at all.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us about your journey and your very thoughtful journey.
Thank
Yeah.
you. No problem at all. I'm happy to help, and it's good to just have yeah, to get my story out there, because I think my friends and family are kind of sick of listening to all my health issues. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have one more question. Does your spouse eat carnivore?
So she started ketogenic diet same time as I did, about 5 or 6 years back. She's not. I've obviously suggested the carnivore step for her because of some health issues that she's dealing with, but she tends to have this aversion to high amounts of meat for some reason. So that's for her to
Yeah,
deal with. I
it
can't
sounds like
force
she has an animal-based diet, nevertheless.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And she's found what works for her personally. So
Very good. Well, thank you once again, and I'm glad you're here in the carnivorse with me,
yeah, thank you.
and carry on.